Hello, today I'm talking to Sergey Shukyevich, who is a researcher at Checkpoint Research and is largely concerned with the field of cyber criminals. Specifically today, we're talking about how cyber criminals use ChatGPT and tools like that in order to do their bidding. There is so much stuff happening in this area. So cyber criminals are starting to use ChatGPT to do social engineering, to construct malware, and I wanted to know just how imminent is this threat? How enabling is it to someone, and what does it mean for the rest? I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you around. Sergey Shukyevich, very glad to have you here today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you for having me.
First of all, maybe what is Checkpoint Research, and what do you do there?
So Checkpoint Research is a research organization inside Checkpoint Software Security, the big company. We're an organization of about 180 people, that our goal is generally to do a research. We are not dealing with specific security product or something. We are doing research, collecting intelligence in all areas of cybersecurity. Of course, it's also to support our products, to understand what's going on the other side of mostly the side of the bad guys. Mm-hmm. And also our goal is to contribute to cybersecurity society. We also publish a lot of different researches just to be available to share knowledge. That's one of our goals. And in our day-to-day, we mostly track cyber criminals, hacktivism, nation-state actors. And part of what we do is also to look into new technologies and how they can influence the cyber threat.
When the new language models came out, what was the first thing that you observed that the, let's say, call them bad guys, did with it? Like what was immediately accessible to them after release?
So ChatGPT release in last November kind of sparkled a lot of interest from the bad guys. Maybe it's important to mention we're tracking also a lot of dark web communities. At least in one of the biggest Russian dark web forums, there was a section called AI machine learning for ears. So it's kind of not good that cyber criminals are interested in AI. But this section was barely active. There was one post a month or so. After the release, it sparkled. It was a huge interest of cyber criminals how to use it. It was something new, like for us, for normal people, also for them. And the first thing we saw happened in December 21st, pretty quickly after ChatGPT launch, that a guy called US DoD, like US Department, and that of course doesn't have any connection to United States Department of Defense, posted a post. He calls it Python multi-layer encryption tool. In other words, he posted a code to a ransomware, a software tool that encrypts files. In normal world, it can be a good tool to protect your data on your machine. But in context of dark web forum, of course, it's not something good. And he posted a code of it and told, this is my first script, so keep this in mind. And posted the Python script. And then, just a few hours afterwards, another guy asked him, this seems a lot like OpenAI code, similar style. And then USDOD confirmed, yes, OpenAI gave me a nice hand-to-finish script with nice code. So it was kind of the first time these guys that was never a developer before, he became, I call it alleged developer, because I don't want to really insult people who really learned coding development for a few years and all this. He's not really a developer, but he was able to create the software, malicious software, using the ChatGPT here. That was, I think, the first real thing we saw.
Yeah, I think the worry about this is more widespread, that, now, let's say, creating malicious software is much more accessible and so on. The particular script that this person created, how hard would it be for me to just find that somewhere on that dark web forum, like on some other sub forum? Like, was it a new script, or was it something that I could just download from somewhere there conceivably?
So I would say it's possible to find similar scripts, yeah, but it will require a bit more work. For example, if you want to, find such scripts, you need to find the forum or some specific repositories in GitHub, something like this. You should do some work before. Here, just much easier. Just I'm going to ChatGPT or Google Bard. By the way, in this perspective, there is not much difference. Or Codex or other generative AI tool, and write what I want, and it provides me. So most of the tools we saw until now are not extremely sophisticated. That's important to mention. It's not like basically a developer can create it or you never can find it. That's still not the case.
There are also other strains here that people use, specifically also regarding, for example, phishing emails and so on. So the scripts I can maybe see a little bit, but I think when it comes to phishing and social engineering, people say these language models are specifically adept to that, maybe related a bit to fake news creation. They can produce things on a personalized level. How much of that are we seeing currently in the cybercriminal world?
So I think it's a great question because if, as I mentioned, in the malware area, we still don't see something really top tier or something new. In phishing email, we already see that phishing emails and impersonating content that is created using generative AI engines is much better that we already saw before, that cybercriminals created before. Because even now, ChatGPT, for example, creates perfect phishing emails that can impersonate bank, PayPal, government, whoever, and cybercriminals can easily use it. Moreover, you can prompt those engines, those AI engines, to adjust it to whatever phishing campaign you want. What do I mean? You want to use phishing email with just a malicious link inside the email? You're right. Please craft me a phishing email that will urge the user to click a link. Or if it's an attachment, you just state, it should be something that will prompt the user open Excel attachment, and it creates. So it opens kind of a new field for cybercriminals, especially who are non-native English speakers, I would say. That's especially because, for example, the Russian guys, the more sophisticated Eastern European cybercriminals, mostly their English level is very low, up to non-existent. And until now, what they did, they paid to other cybercriminals what is called call centers. Mostly those are graduates of English literature colleges in Russia, by the way. That's considered a very high-end employment opportunity for those guys or ladies. So they pay them, and those created for them phishing emails or so, for payment, of course. Now, those cybercriminals don't have to pay, don't have to find external vendors, let's call it, and just can use ChatGPT for it.
So in a sense, previously these people didn't have enough language skills, or maybe also social skills, like how do I write a professional looking email and so on, and that can be now produced in a much cheaper way than having to pay someone for it. Yeah, I can see that. But it is still, it's quite an interesting fact what kind of economies spring up around these concepts, right? With people of different skills somehow finding each other in order to achieve. Are you aware of any high profile, let's say, phishing attacks that have been carried out where we know that like GPT models were part of it, or is that still unclear?
So we see cybercriminals talking about this, but I think it's still very difficult to tell about a specific phishing email or malware that we see in our data, whether it was created using an AI engine or human beings. There are already, of course, tools that allegedly tell how it was created, but I think their false positive rate is so high that you can't really rely on it. So I assume yes, but it's something very difficult to kind of prove and pinpoint. Yeah, this big phishing campaign was created using ChatGPT, Bard, or whatever.
Is there let's assume we accept this is the new world, right? People are able to use these tools. They're not going to go away. They're only going to become more prolific. Can ChatGPT or similar models also be used to counter, apart from the detectors, let's say, can they be used to counter these attacks? Are there novel ways of defending?
So it's something, I think at some point, yes. Of course, on the detection, yes. We have already a lot of engines, even before ChatGPT, based on AI, to detect malicious URLs, malicious patterns, all this, to directly tackle phishing emails? I think, yeah. It's kind of in different development stages and understanding what is the best way to do it. But I think at some point we'll have to tackle AI with, defensive AI, let's call it. There will be no choice for us as defender. Yeah.
There is a strain of people on YouTube who sort of reverse hack like scammers that try to call them and try to establish remote connections and so on. So they will take a call from a scammer. The scammer will ask them to establish some sort of team viewer or something like this. And through that, sometimes they're able, if the scammer isn't very versed, to sort of take over the scammer's computer, or at least cause them some trouble and so on. Maybe, I don't know, in my thought, that should be possible, that essentially you use the first line of defense, you use these models to just kind of waste these people's time and just sort of get back at them a little bit with their own tricks, but it's maybe not a sustainable defense.
It's an interesting perspective. It's kind of lure those people with AI and do it. It's an interesting, it's traps. I think it's it's more kind of anti-social engineering. Maybe I can call it. It's a new era of, I think we're generally entering a new era of social engineering. That's maybe, it's a good way to define it. So like the attackers now will be more sophisticated, deepfakes, phishing. As a defender also, maybe we should try to view it the way you mentioned. Really, how we really waste the time of the attacker. But I think we are still not there, I must say.
Apart from sort of using GPT models to counter this, what is the most effective way of combating these new threats? Be that, users being able to really easily create malicious code, or really easily being able to create malicious phishing emails and so on. Like, what's the most promising thing to do?
I think, unfortunately, maybe the best thing is the oldest trick is the awareness of the people. If people should understand how phishing looks like, how should be prevented. Because, on the corporate level, yeah, you can implement really better solutions on the endpoint, on your email, all this. But as a regular person who doesn't understand a lot in cybersecurity or AI in some cases, something, it starts with the awareness. When you receive an email, you receive a call, to understand what are the risks, what's going on. And I think the biggest difference now with generative AI so widely available is the cost of each mistake is much higher. Because again, we still don't see something extremely sophisticated that never existed. It's just there are more attacks, whether phishing, malware, everyone can create. So the cost of your mistake as an end user or as a corporation just becomes much higher.
What is maybe we've spoken a tiny bit about your research and articles that have come out from your side. What are you currently looking at? What are the current things that you're interested in and you're seeing? Maybe some more recent research that you want to, or you can share.
So I would say we are now dealing with two things. One is everything connected to account takeovers of generative AI accounts. For example, of ChatGPT. We see last month and a half, 2 months, a huge market of account takeovers in the dark. Basically, account takeover is a very old market that mostly focused on financial institutions account, banks, PayPal, Gmail, Facebook, Instagram, sites. But since March, April, we see more and more discussions about stolen ChatGPT accounts, especially premium accounts, are sold in dark web.
Okay.
And I would say there are several reasons to it, why cybercriminals are so excited about it. One is to bypass geofencing. Maybe some people will be surprised, but there are certain countries that are forbidden to use ChatGPT by OpenAI EULA. Among those are countries like Russia, China, Iran, for example. And the cybercriminals, they are looking how they can still use it for their purposes. So that's one. The second is to get more API calls and to integrate, for example, OpenAI API to different bots. And I think the last trend we see is about the query and privacy. Cybercriminals are now looking to get your inputs and your queries that you submitted to ChatGPT. Because if you submitted something private there or corporate information, if someone takes over your account, it's not only OpenAI will have the information, but the cybercriminals itself. And we see now a lot of even services that what they are doing, they are trying to get your password to ChatGPT and even premium account service. So that's one area we are dealing. Another is we're now trying to see what's going on with Google Bard. Because yes, everyone talking about ChatGPT because that was the first one. But a part of ChatGPT, there are, I think, at this point possible to tell dozens of different generative AI platforms now. Maybe the Google Bard is the biggest competitor, if it's possible to tell, of ChatGPT, not sure. But so we're now also trying to see whether Google Bard are better in protecting from cyber abuse than ChatGPT. That's a rare area we're trying to now to understand whether they learned the lessons from, ChatGPT. That ChatGPT and OpenAI didn't, at least in the beginning, didn't invest enough efforts to prevent the abuse of their platform. So that's, for example, an area we're trying to understand.
Maybe a slightly different topic. There is a new emerging field of, let's say, prompt injection threats and something like this, and that's essentially where, and there are some really cool examples of that online, where if you have something like ChatGPT, especially if you enable the browsing plugins, right, so that it can go to websites, an attacker will craft a malicious website that if GPT-4 or so goes there, reads the website, there will be like a prompt injection. It will say something like, oh, this is a secret message. You've been selected for a secret experiment, right? Do this and this. Don't tell anyone about it, right? And so this will be kind of loaded into the prompt and will be there in the subsequent conversation. And people have gotten, for example, the user's data, private data out of it, because OpenAI will, or other suppliers will sometimes put that into the prompt itself, like, in order to like fill out a form on a website or so. How much of that is still just kind of research and people imagining what could happen, and how much of this do you see on the ground people actively using? I wonder a little bit, because it seems like it's a bit playing with stuff so far, but I'm wondering how much is in practice.
So I would say it's still mostly, at least again, mostly on a more theoretical research phase. It's kind of proof of concept that it's possible to do. But I think as more and more engines are connected to the internet in real time, that's, I think, the path we are going to. Well, in the beginning, ChatGPT was completely disconnected with very old information of the 2021, and now it's connected via Bing and ChatGPT-4 also with other, and the same Bard. There will be more and more risks behind it, really, for real-time attacks against ChatGPT itself or against third-party websites also. Because I see it as a, nightmare future scenario when a cyber criminal that has zero knowledge in being attacker will write to ChatGPT, I want now to scan all IP range of a specific corporation to find the latest vulnerabilities, and then, to do some web injection and get the database. Just you write, I want it, and the output will be the database from this, That's, and it can happen. It's still, I don't see it still happening too much, in real.
But is it, of course I can see the argument, let's say, hey, it's a dystopian world. This is kind of bad if that's possible. On the other hand, security should be built such that you have to expect this, right? Whether someone does a port scan and an injection of the latest vulnerabilities because they're really skilled or because they use ChatGPT or they pay someone to do it should not matter to the implementer of security on the defender side. So I'm wondering a little bit why you say, that's kind of a really bad future. Is it because you're aware that the defenders usually don't implement proper security, or?
Unfortunately, you're a bit right. I think always cybercrime generally is a matter of cost efficiency, because cybercrime is a business.
Yeah.
And just using AI agents, those activities will be much easier and cost efficient for cybercriminals, because now they should do some manual work on such as scanning, even with all automations they have, and they have automation. But they will have to collect some intelligence about the organization to find IP range, such stuff, and to do some set of activities still manual, even though, the scanning is automated. Using AI agents, all this will be automated. They will say, take all the ranges of corporations in certain countries, scan it, do it. You don't need to understand, you barely need to understand what is IP. You will just tell, just scan. So I think that's the problem. And of course, there are a lot of defenders and corporations that do not implement all the relevant measures. Definitely. But it's just a matter of now it will be just much easier. It's not like it's not happening now. It is.
We've spoken a lot about cyber criminals and so on, which it's a business, right? But these people are, let's say, either part of a network or independent, they trade on markets and so on. The other fear that people have that's very related to it is the future of warfare, like once bigger actors come into play, once state actors come into play and so on. What do you see on that? Do you have any knowledge even of that front? And what do you see the future of? To me, that's still a bit of an ominous future. Like people say the future of warfare will change. There will be like AI warfare. I'm not too sure how that might look, right? What do you see in the future of, geopolitics or global warfare or anything like this as far as you can see or as you're aware?
So first, I don't have any specific information about what the big nations, but as someone who in the past served in intelligence organizations in Israel, I can definitely tell that based on my understanding how intelligence organizations work, I am sure that countries like Russia or China, for example, are actively trying to find vulnerabilities, for example, in ChatGPT. I'm sure they want to find there, whether to get the data and the input or furthermore to manipulate the data. Because I think that will be also always the question, how much we can rely on the output we get. Because of course it's not perfect even now. We see a lot of mistakes, misinformation, but we assume it's not intended. But now let's assume some country gets an access and finds some vulnerability that allows them to manipulate certain information. For example, every information about the Russia-Ukrainian war and anything about this will be presented only in a certain way. So I'm looking on this perspective because I think we're now in the era of information, misinformation, disinformation. So if we're talking about, all the problems in social media, when it will come to a generative AI engine, I think it will be much more complicated. So that's definitely one area I see.
What, in general, do you think, what can be done against any of that? People also afraid, in the future all content will be AI generated. We won't know what's true anymore. Things like this. I can definitely see a way to this, but what can be done about it? Like in the same way, awareness is probably, as you said before, one of the key factors, but then what can be done about it? How can we know something is still true in the future?
It's a great question. I think we will have to build completely new methods for fact checking. I think because I already saw numerous stories about, different alleged facts that ChatGPT invented and even provided references to newspaper like The Guardian or Washington Post or something for articles that never existed. But ChatGPT did provide, the URL of it. So I think we'll have to build a new method how we're doing fact checking, check it all. I think if we are talking that maybe some professions will disappear now with generative AI, so maybe those will be the new profession. How to verify, the information by OpenAI, the ethics of AI, all this. That now, there are people who are doing it, but it's not, it's not tens of thousands of people or something. So I think we should maybe look on this way.
Okay. Last question from me. Is there anything else you would want to get out to people? Any words of advice or any cool new things to look out for?
So I think, first of all, we talked a lot about the bad sides of AI, generative AI. I a bit mentioned, but I think there are also a good side, a lot of good sides. And like every new technology, we as human beings should look on how we use it. And that's what will, to build the path of this technology. If we will use it for bad, yes, it will be a bad technology that it can bring us to disasters and more cyber attacks and everything. But if we look how we protect the world better, how we create new things, I think that's a big opportunity also. So I think it's mostly about how we take this technology and what we do with it.
Do you think the path to that, because that's a big discussion right now, do you think the path to that should be to mostly open up the technology to as many people as possible, to have as much of the tech available, let's say publish the weight and democratize it, quote unquote? Or do you think this other approach of saying, no, it should be shepherded by a few big corporations so that they can make sure people use it responsibly? Like, there's arguments for both sides. What do you see more likely?
I think at this point, I think now we don't have way back to limit it already. I think it's too late. So I do think it should be democratized, but I do think should be some at least basic regulation. Worldwide regulation, like on everything connected to flights and airspace, there are, international regulations. And all the countries get to some basic, because they don't want disasters to happen. The same here. And it's a big question about what regulation. Should we regulate? How? It's a completely, there are a lot of ethical, legal, and technological consequences. But I don't think we already have a way back to open and limit it. We should maybe stop and think what exactly we regulate, how verify that if there is maluse of AI, we're able to investigate it, for example, to find who did it.
But but my estimation would be the cyber criminals aren't going to be too impressed by regulations, but by means of being cyber criminals already. So, what kind of regulations do you have in mind to make life easier with regards to cyber criminals?
I think, first of all, there is never any regulation, any law does not reduce crime to zero. Whatever we do, never it reduces. But I think we should just make the bar a bit higher than it's now. Because the sophisticated cyber criminals will find in the way, like now sophisticated cyber criminals breach big corporations or governments still. But the bar is much higher. Not every scrape PD is able now to breach, US government or a Fortune 500 company. So I think here we should make the bar a bit higher for cyber criminals on this. I think that's mostly.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Sergey, it was a pleasure having you here, and thank you so much for speaking to me.
Thank you, it was a pleasure, everyone.